The 90s gave us The Matrix and Terminator 2, sure, but what about the sci-fi gems that slipped through the cracks? While everyone was obsessing over CGI revolutions, dozens of brilliant films were dying in video store back rooms. Here's a question that'll haunt you. What if the best sci-fi of the decade wasn't what Hollywood told you to watch? Buckle up, because these 15 films prove that sometimes the movies nobody saw were the ones everybody should have been talking about. Number 15. Cube, 1997. This Canadian nightmare will mess with your head harder than any big-budget blockbuster ever could. 6 strangers wake up inside a massive structure made entirely of interconnected cubic rooms, each one potentially filled with deadly traps. No memory of how they got there, no idea who put them there, just mathematics, paranoia, and survival instincts kicking into overdrive. Director Vincenzo Natali built this entire film on a shoestring budget of $350,000, shooting in just one cube set that they kept redressing with different colored lighting. The genius move? Making the trap mechanisms entirely mathematical, turning prime numbers and Cartesian coordinates into instruments of death. Critics initially dismissed it as too cerebral, too cold, but audiences discovered it on home video and turned it into a cult phenomenon that spawned 2 sequels and endless academic discussions about social structures and human nature under pressure. The cast was filled with Canadian theater actors who brought serious dramatic weight to what could have been a cheap gimmick. Nicole DeBoer, who'd later joined Star Trek Deep Space Nine, plays Levin, the math student who becomes their best hope for survival. Maurice Dean Wint delivers a chilling performance as Quentin, a cop whose authority complex turns him into the group's greatest internal threat. The claustrophobia is suffocating, the deaths are brutal, and the existential dread that comes from realizing there might be no reason for any of it hits harder than any monster reveal. Film festivals ate it up, especially after it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, where it immediately became the movie everyone was whispering about in the lobby. What makes Cube truly special is how it strips sci-fi down to its philosophical bones. No aliens, no time travel, no fancy tech beyond the rooms themselves. Just pure psychological horror wrapped in a high-concept premise. The booby traps are inventive and terrifying, without relying on gore for shock value. Acid sprays, razor wire grids, sound-activated flamethrowers, each room is a new nightmare. The script forces these characters to confront their own uselessness in a system designed to destroy them, and watching their group dynamics collapse is more terrifying than any monster. This film proved you don't need $100 million to create something that burrows into your brain and refuses to leave. Number 14. Dark City, 1998. Alex Proyas crafted a neo-noir masterpiece that The Matrix basically copied a year later, and nobody wants to admit it. John Murdoch wakes up in a bathtub with no memory, a dead body in the room, and the creeping suspicion that reality itself is lying to him. He's right, because the entire city is controlled by the Strangers, a race of dying aliens who rearrange the urban landscape every night at midnight, implanting false memories into every human while searching for the secret of the human soul. New Line Cinema barely marketed this thing, dumping it into theaters a year before The Matrix arrived and stole all its visual ideas. The production design is absolutely insane, a blend of 40s noir, German expressionism, and dystopian futurism that creates a city that feels like it exists outside of time. Proyas fought with the studio constantly because they wanted to dumb it down, add more action, explain less, but he kept pushing for the philosophical weight. Rufus Sewell plays Murdoch with a perfect blend of confusion and determination, a man trying to remember who he is while discovering he might have the power to reshape reality itself. Jennifer Connelly is his maybe wife Emma, trapped in a life that keeps changing every time the clock strikes 12. But the real star is Kiefer Sutherland as Dr. Schreiber, the scientist forced to help the Strangers, delivering every line with a deliberate stammer that makes him feel perpetually on the edge of a breakdown. William Hurt shows up as the detective trying to solve murders in a city where nothing is real, and his existential exhaustion is palpable in every scene. The Strangers themselves are nightmare fuel, pale, bald creatures in long black coats who move in groups and speak in chorus, their individuality stripped away just like they're doing to humanity. Roger Ebert named this as one of his favorite films, putting it on his great movies list years later and calling it a film of astonishing visuals and imagination. The tuning sequences where the strangers literally reshape buildings and memories are still breathtaking, practical effects, and forced perspective, creating something that feels more real than most CGI. The climax takes place above the city, revealing that it's all a petri dish floating in space, and that reveal still hits like a freight truck. Dark City asks what makes us human if our memories can be rewritten every night, if our entire identity is just data that can be swapped out and replaced. The answer it gives is both hopeful and terrifying. The film tanked at the box office, making only $14 million against a $27 million budget, but it's aged like fine wine while lesser films crumbled. Every shot looks like a painting, every scene drips with atmosphere, and the philosophical questions it raises about identity and free will are more relevant now than ever. This is essential viewing for anyone who thinks they know 90s sci-fi. Number 13. The 13th Floor, 1999. This is the third simulation movie of the late 90s that everyone forgets, but it might be the most emotionally devastating of them all. Douglas Hall works for a tech company in 1999 that's created a perfect simulation of 1937 Los Angeles, complete with fully sentient artificial people who don't know their programs. When his boss is murdered, Hall dives into the simulation to find clues, only to discover evidence that his own reality might be a simulation too, stacked in layers of artificial worlds where everyone is both a god and a puppet simultaneously. Based on Daniel F. Galoui's novel Simulacron 3, this film had the misfortune of coming out the same year as The Matrix, getting completely overshadowed and forgotten, despite having equally mind-bending ideas. Director Joseph Rusnak created a visual language that shifts between the sleek modern world and the golden age noir of the 30s, making each reality feel distinct and fully realized. Craig Bierko plays Hall with a vulnerability that makes you feel every moment of his reality crumbling around him. Vincent D'Onofrio is phenomenal as Whitney, a bartender in the simulation who starts to question his existence, and his breakdown when he reaches the edge of his programmed world is heartbreaking. Gretchen Mol appears as a mysterious woman who knows more than she should, and her performance carries the weight of someone watching people she cares about trapped in a system she can't fully explain. The supporting cast in the 1937 simulation brings a ton of character to what could have been throwaway roles, making that world feel lived in and real, which makes the existential horror hit harder when characters realize they're not. The film bombed hard, making only $18 million worldwide against its $16 million budget, largely because Sony had no idea how to market it alongside The Matrix. Critics were mixed, with some praising its ambition and others calling it a wannabe. But the twist ending is genuinely shocking, revealing that even the 1999 world is a simulation being run in 2024, with a woman from the future pulling Hall into her reality while his entire existence is about to be shut down. The emotional core is what saves this from being just another high-concept thriller, because Hall's relationship with a simulated woman forces him to confront whether love can exist between beings who exist on different planes of reality. The production design deserves more credit, especially the 30s Los Angeles recreation that was built mostly with practical sets and green screen work that holds up shockingly well. The film's exploration of consciousness and existence might be more pessimistic than The Matrix's chosen one narrative, because here, nobody's escaping to the real world and saving everyone. People just keep discovering they're one more layer deep in someone else's game. It's bleak, stylish, and completely underseen. A victim of bad timing that deserves a serious critical reevaluation. Number 12, Gattaca, 1997. Andrew Niccol wrote and directed a sci-fi film with almost no special effects that feels more prophetic every single year. In the near future, genetic engineering has created a society where your DNA determines your entire life, from career prospects to how long you'll live, and Vincent Freeman is an invalid, naturally conceived with all the messy genetic imperfections that make him human. He dreams of going to space, so he assumes the identity of Jerome Morrow, a genetically perfect specimen who's been paralyzed in an accident, using Jerome's blood and tissue samples to fool the daily biometric scans at the Gattaca Space Corporation. This is sci-fi as social commentary, using the future to talk about class, discrimination, and the obsession with perfection that already existed in the 90s and has only gotten worse. Columbia Pictures gave Nicole a $36 million budget, and he spent it on creating a retro-futuristic aesthetic that looks like the 60s imagined by someone from the 40s, all clean lines and muted colors. Ethan Hawke plays Vincent with a quiet determination that makes every small victory feel enormous, and his performance is all about the eyes, constantly showing the fear of being caught mixed with the defiance of someone refusing to accept the limitations placed on him. Uma Thurman is Irene, a genetically enhanced woman still deemed inferior because of a minor heart defect, and her chemistry with Hawke sells the romance as two people fighting against a system designed to keep them down. Jude Law gives maybe his best performance as Jerome, a man destroyed by the gap between genetic perfection and actual achievement, drinking himself to death while living vicariously through Vincent's borrowed success. The emotional weight of Jerome's arc is crushing because he represents what happens when you're told you're perfect, but you still fail. Critics loved it, with Roger Ebert giving it 3.5 stars and praising its intelligence and visual style, but audiences stayed away, and the film made only $12 million domestically. It's become a staple in science classrooms and ethics discussions because the questions it raises about genetic determinism and designer babies have only become more relevant as CRISPR and gene editing move from sci-fi to reality. The murder mystery plot running through the film is almost secondary to the daily tension of Vincent trying to pass as someone else, scrubbing every cell of himself away to avoid detection, living in constant fear that one eyelash or flake of skin will destroy everything. The production design is stunning, filming locations like Frank Lloyd Wright's Marin County Civic Center and the CLA building, creating a world that feels both timeless and futuristic. Every frame is composed like a painting, all symmetry and negative space, giving the film a cold beauty that mirrors the society it's depicting. The swimming sequences between Vincent and his genetically superior brother, Anton, are the emotional heart, two brothers racing in the ocean, with one supposedly destined to win and the other refusing to lose. And Vincent's victory is about willpower over programming. The ending is perfect, bittersweet and hopeful, as Vincent finally goes to space while Jerome completes his own tragic arc back on Earth. This film deserved to be a massive hit, and it's a crime that it wasn't. Number 11, The Hidden, 1987. Wait, wrong decade. Let's actually hit you with Strange Days, 1995. Catherine Bigelow's cyberpunk fever dream that nobody appreciated until years later. Los Angeles on the last 2 days of 1999, and ex-cop Lenny Nero is dealing squid recordings, illegal tech that lets you experience someone else's memories and sensations in real time, everything from romantic encounters to violent crimes. He's hunting for a particular recording that shows the murder of a prostitute and rapper, stumbling into a conspiracy involving corrupt cops, racial tensions, and the apocalyptic energy of Millennium Panic. James Cameron wrote and produced this, and his fingerprints are all over it, but this is pure Bigelow, mixing action with social commentary and refusing to make anything easy or comfortable for the audience. The film cost $42 million and made only $7 million domestically, an absolute disaster that killed its momentum, despite being one of the most ambitious sci-fi films of the decade. Ralph Fiennes is absolutely electric as Lenny, playing him as a smooth-talking lowlife who's still clinging to his ex-girlfriend and his old life, unable to move forward until the plot forces him to. Angela Bassett is Mace, Lenny's friend and protector, a limousine driver and single mother who's tougher than anyone else in the film, and Bassett brings so much strength and humanity to a role that could have been just the action sidekick. Juliette Lewis plays Faith, Lenny's ex, who's now a rock star, and she's the perfect representation of someone who's moved on while Lenny stays stuck. The squid sequences are shot first person, putting you directly into the recordings, and Bigelow uses this to create some of the most visceral and uncomfortable moments in 90s cinema, including an extended sequence showing an attack from the attacker's perspective that's deliberately designed to be unbearable. The racial politics are front and center, with the murder of rapper Jericho 1 sparking riots and protests. And the film's depiction of LAPD corruption and violence feels ripped from the headlines of the Rodney King era. Critics were split, with some praising its ambition and others put off by its intensity and nihilism. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars, calling it a technical achievement, but questioning whether anyone would want to experience something so relentlessly dark. The climax takes place during a New Year's Eve street party descending into chaos, and Bigelow stages it like urban warfare, bodies everywhere and hope running on empty. The film's prediction of millennial anxiety and surveillance culture was dead on, even if the specific tech never materialized exactly as shown. Strange Days flopped because audiences in 1995 weren't ready for something this dark and challenging, and Fox botched the marketing completely. But it's been rediscovered as a prophetic masterpiece, a film that understood how technology would change our relationship with reality and truth, how easily footage can be manipulated or suppressed, how power protects itself through violence and lies. The squid tech is basically social media and body cameras mashed together, letting everyone record everything while those in power control what gets seen. This film is essential viewing, a time capsule of 90s anxiety that somehow became more relevant 2 decades later. Number 10, eXistenZ, 1999. David Cronenberg made a body horror video game movie that's equal parts disgusting and brilliant, and it's the most Cronenberg thing ever. Game designer Allegra Geller is demonstrating her new virtual reality system, eXistenZ, which uses organic game pods that plug directly into bioports installed in players' spines, when an assassin tries to kill her during the demo. She goes on the run with security guard Ted Picoul, constantly jacking into the game to test if it's been damaged, but the line between game and reality starts dissolving until neither they nor the audience can tell which level is real anymore. This is Cronenberg doing his greatest hits package while also skewering corporate control, artistic freedom, and humanity's relationship with technology. The budget was $15 million, and every dollar went into creating the grossest, most uncomfortably organic tech you've ever seen. Game controllers made of flesh with umbilical cords, guns built from bones and teeth, mutations and transformations that'll make your skin crawl. Jennifer Jason Leigh plays Allegra with the intensity of an artist protecting her creation, someone who's more comfortable in virtual worlds than reality, and her chemistry with Jude Law's Picoul creates a fascinating dynamic of experience versus innocence. Law plays Ted as constantly overwhelmed, someone who's never even had a bioport until this nightmare begins, and his revulsion at the body modifications mirrors audience discomfort. The supporting cast, including Willem Dafoe, Ian Holm, and Don McKellar, all play multiple versions of themselves across game levels, and figuring out who's a player, who's a program, and who's working for which side becomes impossible by design. Sarah Polley shows up in the third act, selling black market goods with an accent you can't place, adding to the dream logic that takes over completely. The film premiered at the Berlin Film Festival and divided critics immediately, with some calling it Cronenberg's return to form and others dismissing it as self-parody. It made only $2 million domestically, getting crushed by The Matrix, which had come out just a month earlier, with a much more audience-friendly approach to virtual reality. But eXistenZ is weirder, grosser, and ultimately more honest about where gaming and VR were heading. The game within a game within a game structure means you're constantly questioning what you're watching, and Cronenberg refuses to give you any anchors or certainty. The ending reveals that everything might have been another game level, and the final scene cuts to black on the question, are we still in the game, with no answer provided. The production design is nightmare fuel in the best way, props and sets that look alive and diseased. Everything's slightly wrong and uncomfortable. The organic tech concept predates the conversation about AI and neural interfaces we're having now, asking what happens when technology becomes indistinguishable from life, when you can't tell where you end and the system begins. The violence is sudden and shocking, with the game sometimes forcing players to commit acts they find horrifying, raising questions about free will and moral responsibility in virtual spaces. The bioport installation scene, where a gas station attendant uses a pneumatic drill to punch a hole in Ted's spine, is unwatchable in the best way, Cronenberg making you feel every moment of violation. eXistenZ is too strange and too gross for mainstream success, but it's exactly what you want from Cronenberg in full control of his vision. The script is tight, every scene serving the paranoid spiral, and the final twist that this might be a game about assassinating game designers makes perfect meta-sense. This is required viewing for anyone who thinks they know body horror or virtual reality stories. Number 9, 12 Monkeys, 1995. Terry Gilliam took a French short film and turned it into a time travel tragedy that's more about madness than mechanics. James Cole is a prisoner in 2035, sent back to 1996 to gather information about a plague that wiped out 5 billion people, forcing survivors underground. But time travel is destroying his mind, fractured memories and prophetic visions blurring together, and he keeps getting the dates wrong, ending up in 1990 first, where he's immediately thrown in a mental institution. There he meets Jeffrey Goins, a fellow patient who might be the leader of the Army of the 12 Monkeys, the group supposedly responsible for releasing the virus. Universal Pictures gave Gilliam $29 million, and he used it to create a grimy, tactile future and a diseased-looking past, everything shot through filters that make the world look like it's already dying. The film made $57 million domestically, making it Gilliam's most financially successful film, and critics finally gave him his due with widespread praise. Bruce Willis plays Cole with a vulnerability he rarely showed in action films. A man who's been living underground eating rats and suddenly gets thrown into a world he barely remembers, unsure if he's the sanest person alive or completely insane. Brad Pitt earned his first Oscar nomination for Jeffrey Goins, playing him as a twitchy, manic genius, all jittery movements and rapid-fire dialogue, a performance that announced that he could do more than just pretty boy roles. Madeline Stowe is Dr. Catherine Rayleigh, the psychiatrist who starts as Cole's doctor and becomes his only anchor to sanity, and her performance grounds the film's wilder elements. The chemistry between Willis and Stowe sells the impossible romance. Two people from different times falling in love while racing toward a fixed point in history that can't be changed. The paradox at the heart of 12 Monkeys is crushing because Cole isn't sent back to stop the plague, just to gather information, meaning everything that happens has already happened, and his presence in the past is part of the loop. The airport scene from Cole's recurring childhood memory is the ending, revealing that child Cole watched adult Cole get shot, creating a closed time loop of trauma and inevitability. Gilliam shoots it all with his signature style, wide-angle lenses and cluttered frames, making both the future and past feel claustrophobic and overwhelming. The mental institution sequences are particularly brutal, showing the thin line between genius and madness, prophet and patient, with the medical establishment unable to tell the difference. Christopher Plummer and David Morse round out the cast, with Morse playing the real villain in a twist that most audiences didn't see coming. The film's take on time travel is refreshingly deterministic, no changing the past or saving the day, just the horror of knowing what's coming and being powerless to stop it. The final shot of Rayleigh and Cole's younger self in the airport is devastating, a moment of recognition across time that changes nothing and everything simultaneously. The production used locations in Philadelphia and Baltimore, finding decaying industrial spaces that made the future feel like it was built from our present's ruins. 12 Monkeys works as action, thriller, romance, and existential horror all at once, never losing sight of Cole's humanity, even as it questions his sanity. The plague origin reveal is darkly comic, an accidental release by a fringe environmentalist rather than any grand conspiracy, fitting Gilliam's absurdist worldview perfectly. This film influenced everything from Lost to Looper, proving that time travel stories work best when they're about characters rather than mechanics. Essential viewing. Number 8, The Man from Earth, 2007. Okay, that's 2007. Let's hit you with Millennium, 1989. No, wait, wrong decade again. Let's go with Contact, 1997. Robert Zemeckis adapting Carl Sagan's novel into the most scientifically rigorous first contact film ever made. Dr. Ellie Arroway has spent years searching for extraterrestrial intelligence through SETI, facing funding cuts and skepticism from the scientific establishment. When she detects a signal from the star Vega containing plans for a mysterious machine, she's thrust into a global debate about science, faith, politics, and humanity's place in the universe. Warner Bros. Gave Zemeckis $90 million, and he used it to create something rare in Hollywood sci-fi, a film that takes ideas seriously, spending more time on congressional hearings and philosophical debates than explosions and action sequences. The film made $171 million worldwide, proving audiences would show up for intelligent science fiction when it was done right. Jodie Foster carries the entire film as Ellie, playing her as brilliant and driven, but also deeply human, someone whose atheism comes from loss rather than intellectual superiority. And her journey from skeptic to believer to enlightened skeptic again is beautifully handled. Matthew McConaughey plays Palmer Joss, a spiritual advisor who represents the faith side of the equation, and their relationship provides the emotional and philosophical core, two people who love each other but stand on opposite sides of an unbridgeable divide. The supporting cast is stacked with character actors. James Woods as the government bureaucrat trying to control everything, Tom Skerritt as Ellie's mentor who betrays her, John Hurt as the eccentric billionaire funding the project, and David Morse as Ellie's father in flashbacks that provide her emotional foundation. The scientific accuracy was paramount, with Sagan's widow Anne Druyan consulting throughout production, making sure every detail from radio astronomy to physics held up to scrutiny. The signal itself is genius, a television signal showing Hitler at the 1936 Olympics, because it was the first broadcast powerful enough to leave Earth, meaning aliens are basically trolling humanity by sending back our worst moment. The machine design is beautifully alien, all spinning rings and electromagnetic fields, and the construction sequence plays like a techno-thriller. The sabotage and explosion that destroys the first machine provides actual stakes and tragedy, killing hundreds, including Jake Busey's religious extremist who couldn't reconcile faith with contact. Zemeckis used groundbreaking effects, worked to insert President Clinton into the film using actual press conference footage, a technique that was controversial but added verisimilitude. The journey sequence is visually stunning, Ellie falling through wormholes and seeing impossible structures, the film never explaining if it's real or an elaborate test, leaving that ambiguity intact. The beach scene where she meets an alien wearing her father's face is emotionally devastating. Science fiction at its most human. A daughter getting closure she never expected. Foster's performance in that sequence sells the wonder and heartbreak simultaneously, making you believe she's experiencing something transformative. The ending is perfect and infuriating for some audiences, because there's no proof, no evidence, just Ellie's testimony and 18 hours of static on the recording device, forcing the world to take her experience on faith. The congressional hearing, where she's grilled, mirrors religious testimony, turning science and faith inside out. Critics were mostly positive, with some complaining about the romantic subplot or the spiritual elements, but it earned recognition as one of the smartest sci-fi films of the decade. Contact proves that science fiction works best when it asks big questions without providing easy answers, when it treats the audience as intelligent and capable of grappling with complexity. This is essential viewing for anyone who thinks sci-fi is just spaceships and laser battles. Number 7. P.I. 1998. Darren Aronofsky's debut is a 68-minute nightmare shot in high-contrast black and white for $60,000, and it's more intense than most blockbusters. Maximilian Cohen is a paranoid mathematician searching for patterns in the stock market, convinced that mathematics underlies everything from financial systems to the Torah. He's building his own supercomputer in his apartment, suffering from blinding headaches and hallucinations, descending into madness as religious fanatics and corporate suits both try to steal his research. This is guerrilla filmmaking at its finest. Aronofsky and his team shooting on grainy reversal film stock to save money, creating a visual style that's all harsh light and deep shadows, making Max's apartment look like a prison built from technology and paranoia. The film premiered at Sundance and won Best Director, launching Aronofsky's career and proving that you don't need resources, just vision and commitment. Sean Gillette plays Max with twitchy intensity, someone who's clearly brilliant but also clearly falling apart, popping pills and isolating himself from human connection. His only friend is Sol Robeson, his old mentor played by Mark Margolis, who serves as the film's voice of reason, warning Max that his obsession will destroy him. The Kabbalah sect and Wall Street investors circle Max like vultures, everyone wanting to use his genius for their own purposes. The paranoia is suffocating, every stranger a potential threat, every interaction suspect, and Aronofsky shoots it all in tight close-ups and aggressive editing that mirrors Max's fracturing mental state. The score by Clint Mansell, his first collaboration with Aronofsky, is industrial and oppressive, electronic noise and driving percussion that never lets up, building tension until your nerves are shredded. The headache sequences are visceral, practical effects and sound design, creating something physically uncomfortable to watch. The recurring image of Max's neighbor asking him to predict stock numbers becomes more sinister as the film progresses, innocent questions transforming into existential interrogation. The number 216 becomes an obsession, appearing everywhere, the film using numerology and mathematical patterns to create a conspiracy that might be real or might be Max's breakdown. The ending is shocking and ambiguous, Max using a power drill on his own temple in what might be surgery or suicide, destroying the part of his brain that sees the patterns, and the final scene shows him in the park, calm and content, but unable to do basic math anymore. Did he find enlightenment through destruction, or just lobotomize himself into peace? Aronofsky refuses to answer, leaving that horror for the audience to process. The film made $3 million against its tiny budget, a massive return that got Hollywood's attention and led to Requiem for a Dream 2 years later. Pi is uncomfortable, claustrophobic, and absolutely brilliant, proof that limitations breed creativity. The low-budget aesthetic isn't a weakness, but a feature, making everything feel raw and immediate. No glossy cinematography to soften the paranoia. The philosophical questions about whether the universe is ordered or chaotic, whether God is a mathematician or mathematics is God, these ideas drive the plot more than any action. This film influenced everyone from Christopher Nolan to Shane Carruth, showing that cerebral science fiction could work on micro-budgets if the ideas were strong enough. Essential viewing for anyone interested in indie sci-fi or Aronofsky's evolution as a filmmaker. Number 6, Sphere, 1998. Barry Levinson adapted Michael Crichton's novel into a deep-sea psychological thriller that bombed hard but deserves serious reevaluation. A team of scientists is assembled to investigate a massive spacecraft discovered on the ocean floor, apparently having been there for 300 years. Inside, they find a mysterious sphere that grants wishes but manifests fears, turning their underwater habitat into a nightmare where imagination becomes lethal reality. Warner Brothers spent $80 million on this, building massive practical sets and underwater environments. Banking on the Crichton name, after Jurassic Park's success, it made only $37 million domestically, a disaster that killed its momentum, but the film is far better than its reputation suggests. A slow-burn descent into paranoia and terror. Dustin Hoffman plays Norman Goodman, a psychologist completely out of his depth, literally and figuratively, trying to keep the team together as reality breaks down. Sharon Stone is biochemist Beth Halperin, hiding trauma and secrets that become manifest once the sphere starts playing with their minds. Samuel L. Jackson is mathematician Harry Adams, the first to enter the sphere and the first to start wielding its power, intentionally or not. Liev Schreiber rounds out the main cast as Ted Fielding, the astrophysicist whose enthusiasm turns to terror as people start dying. The chemistry between these actors sells the intellectual credibility early and the paranoia later, everyone suspecting everyone else of using the sphere against them. The underwater setting creates natural claustrophobia, the habitat surrounded by crushing pressure and darkness, any breach meaning instant death. The production design is impressive, building functional sets with working airlocks and equipment, making the environment feel real and dangerous. The creature attacks early on establish stakes, giant jellyfish appearing from nowhere and killing crew members, but the film's smart enough to reveal these as manifestations rather than external threats, meaning the team is fighting their own subconscious. The tension comes from not knowing who's manifesting what, whether attacks are intentional or accidental, and whether anyone will survive their own imagination. Critics savaged it, calling it slow and confusing, complaining about the ending's ambiguity and the lack of clear answers. But the ending is perfect, the survivors choosing to forget everything that happened, using the sphere's power one last time to erase their own memories because they've proven humanity isn't ready for unlimited power. It's a rare sci-fi ending that's genuinely mature, acknowledging human limitations rather than triumphalism. The film asks what would happen if every fear and desire in your subconscious became real, and the answer is chaos, death, and the terrifying realization that we barely understand our own minds. The sphere itself is a beautiful enigma, a perfect golden orb that reflects everything but reveals nothing, clearly alien but providing no context or instruction manual. The film's refusal to explain exactly where it came from or what it wants frustrated audiences expecting typical sci-fi exposition. But that mystery is the point, a test that humanity fails because we can't handle power without understanding. The underwater scenes are legitimately tense, practical effects and careful editing, creating real danger without relying on CGI creatures. The ensemble cast elevates material that could have been schlocky in lesser hands, playing every moment seriously. Sphere deserved better than it got, a victim of bad timing, weak marketing, and audience expectations that didn't match what Levinson delivered. Revisit this one with fresh eyes, and you'll find a smart, disturbing exploration of consciousness and power wrapped in a deep-sea thriller. Number 5. The Arrival, 1996. Not to be confused with Denis Villeneuve's Arrival. 20 years later, David Twohy's film is a paranoid alien invasion thriller that nobody saw coming. Radio astronomer Zane Zeminski discovers a signal from space and gets immediately fired for his discovery, leading him down a conspiracy rabbit hole involving climate change, alien infiltration, and a plan to terraform Earth into a hotter planet, more suitable for extraterrestrial colonization. This is low-budget sci-fi done right. A $7 million production that looks like it cost 3 times that, through clever use of practical effects, on-location shooting, and genuine creativity. The film made $14 million domestically, respectable, but not enough to make it a cultural touchstone, and it's been mostly forgotten despite being one of the smartest invasion films of the 90s. Charlie Sheen plays Zane with paranoid intensity, completely believable as someone smart enough to see the truth, but powerless to make anyone believe him, and his performance grounds the increasingly wild conspiracy in human frustration. Ron Silver is the villain Gordian, an astronomer working with the aliens, and Silver plays him as reasonable and calm, making his betrayal of humanity feel coldly logical rather than cartoonishly evil. Lindsay Krause appears as Zane's colleague who might be trustworthy, and the film keeps you guessing about everyone's allegiances. Terry Polo plays the neighbor who gets dragged into Zane's investigation, providing an audience surrogate for the insanity unfolding. The alien reveal is genius. Not little green men, but normal-looking humans with backwards-bending knees hidden under their pants. A simple practical effect that's genuinely creepy once you notice it. The film's central concept that aliens are causing climate change to make Earth habitable for themselves is darkly brilliant, turning environmental disaster into invasion prep. Twohy wrote and directed, showing the same smart sci-fi instincts he'd later bring to Pitch Black and Chronicles of Riddick, building worlds with limited resources through strong concepts and commitment to detail. The Mexico sequences where Zane tracks the signal source are shot like a spy thriller, infiltration, and narrow escapes rather than laser battles. The film builds dread through investigation, every new discovery making the conspiracy bigger and more hopeless. The scene where Zane realizes one of his young neighbors is an alien, and the kid just calmly confirms it, is chilling. The aliens so confident in their plan, they don't even bother hiding anymore. The climax involves Zane destroying a massive underground alien power station. Practical effects and miniatures creating destruction that still looks impressive decades later. What makes The Arrival special is its intelligence and paranoia, treating the invasion as a slow takeover rather than Independence Day-style spectacle. The aliens aren't interested in dialogue or coexistence. They're just quietly preparing Earth for colonization, while humans blame climate change on themselves. It's cynical and smart. Sci-fi that engages with real environmental concerns while delivering thriller beats. The ending is ambiguous, Zane exposing the conspiracy, but the film questioning whether anyone with power will actually do anything about it. A prescient take on institutional paralysis. The film spawned a straight-to-video sequel without Sheen that's best forgotten, but the original holds up as lean, mean, intelligent sci-fi. Toohey proves you can make something memorable without massive budgets. You just need strong ideas and the craft to execute them. Seek this one out if you want conspiracy thrillers with actual brains. Number 4, Event Horizon, 1997, Paul W.S. Anderson made a haunted house movie in space that's equal parts Alien and Hellraiser, and it's absolutely brutal. The Event Horizon was an experimental ship designed to create artificial black holes for faster-than-light travel. But it disappeared 7 years ago and has just reappeared near Neptune with no crew and a disturbing distress signal. A rescue team led by Captain Miller boards the derelict ship to investigate, discovering that the Event Horizon didn't just travel through space, but through a dimension of pure chaos and evil, and it brought something back with it. Paramount gave Anderson $60 million, and he used it to create one of the most disturbing sci-fi horror films ever made, building massive practical sets and filming sequences so violent they had to be cut to avoid an NC-17 rating. Lawrence Fishburne plays Captain Miller with weathered authority, a man who's lost people before and is determined not to lose anyone else, making his failure to protect his crew even more devastating. Sam Neill is Dr. Weir, the ship's creator who becomes increasingly obsessed with the Event Horizon as it reveals its true nature. And Neil's transformation from rational scientist to something much darker is genuinely frightening. The ensemble includes Kathleen Quinlan, Jolie Richardson, Richard T. Jones, and Jason Isaacs, all bringing distinct personalities that make their eventual deaths and possessions hit harder. The chemistry between the crew sells their camaraderie early, making the horror of watching them turn on each other or get killed by the ship that much worse. The production design is incredible. The Event Horizon itself, a Gothic cathedral built from industrial metal and impossible architecture, rotating corridors and the central gravity drive that looks like something from a medieval torture chamber. The film's visual language mixes sci-fi with religious horror, Latin phrases scrawled on walls, the ship itself seemingly demonic. The reveal that the crew didn't just die, but tortured each other in an orgy of violence is conveyed through fragmentary footage that's nightmarish even in its censored form. The original cut was allegedly so violent that test audiences walked out, and Paramount forced massive cuts, with much of that footage now lost or destroyed. The film bombed at release, making only $47 million worldwide, with critics mostly dismissing it as derivative schlock. But it's developed a massive cult following in the decades since, recognized as one of the best sci-fi horror films ever made, and a major influence on Dead Space and countless other games and films. The horror comes from the implication that faster-than-light travel requires going through hell itself, that the universe has places humans were never meant to see, and exposure to them breaks you fundamentally. The scenes of Miller's visions of his dead crew member are emotionally devastating, using horror to explore survivor guilt and PTSD. The practical effects are stunning, zero-gravity sequences using rotating sets and wire work to create convincing weightlessness. The violence is creative and horrible, people being torn apart, eyeless and mutilated, the ship using their fears and traumas against them. The climax where Weir fully gives himself over to the ship, gouging out his own eyes and becoming something inhuman, is peak body horror. The explosion sequence using miniatures and pyrotechnics creates destruction that CGI still struggles to match. Anderson's direction is stylish and effective, creating atmosphere and dread through lighting and sound design. Event Horizon failed because it was too extreme for mainstream audiences and too sci-fi for horror fans, falling between genres and getting crushed. But it's aged incredibly well, a film that understood cosmic horror and wasn't afraid to go to truly dark places. The final shot of the rescue team, finding Miller's crew, alive but clearly not themselves, is the perfect horror ending, suggesting the evil has escaped containment. This is essential viewing for anyone who wants sci-fi that doesn't flinch from the abyss. Number 3, The City of Lost Children, 1995. French directors Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro created a steampunk fever dream that's visually unlike anything else in 90s sci-fi. Crank is an evil scientist who can't dream, so he's kidnapping children to steal their dreams, aging rapidly without them. One is a strongman from a traveling circus who teams up with a young girl named Miette to rescue his adopted brother from Crank's nightmare laboratory fortress in the middle of the ocean. This is fantasy and sci-fi blended with fairy tale logic, a world built entirely in studios with impossible architecture and rusted Victorian tech. The film cost $18 million, mostly going to the elaborate production design and miniatures, creating a world that feels both handmade and alien. It made only $2 million in the US, barely getting distributed, but it's a masterpiece of visual storytelling and imagination. Ron Perlman plays One, the strong man with gentle humanity, a giant who's protective and kind despite his appearance, and his chemistry with young Judith Vitae, as Miette creates an unlikely partnership that drives the emotional core. Daniel Emilfork is terrifying as Krank, simultaneously pitiful and monstrous. A villain whose motivation is understandable even as his actions are unforgivable. The cast includes clones, a brain in a tank, conjoined twins called the Octopus, and an army of blind cult members, every character design pushing reality into surreal nightmare territory. The film is shot like a living painting, every frame composed with obsessive detail, colors oversaturated and distorted, making the entire world feel like it exists in a submarine or a rusted factory. The dream-stealing sequences are pure visual poetry, children's nightmares playing out in exaggerated symbolism and horror, Crank trapped watching, but unable to experience them properly. The film's sense of humor is pitch black, finding comedy in the grotesque and absurd, without undermining the stakes or danger. The octopus worshipping a missing brain, the clones all bickering with each other. These moments of levity make the darker elements more effective by contrast. Jeunet and Caro created a world with its own internal logic, never explaining the science or backstory, just presenting this reality and trusting audiences to accept it. The plot is simple, but the execution is anything but. Chases through impossible architecture, traps involving trained fleas, a sequence where characters use tear gas to control a crowd while Miette robs them blind. The climax involves rescuing all the children, and Crank's accelerated aging finally catching up with him, poetic justice delivered through the same dreams he was stealing. The film influenced everything from BioShock to Tim Burton's later work, proving that sci-fi doesn't need to be realistic or grounded to work. It just needs to be internally consistent and visually committed. The practical effects, miniatures, and forced perspective create something more tactile and real than most CGI of the era. The score by Angelo Badalamenti is haunting and whimsical, matching the film's tonal complexity. This is a film that's meant to be experienced visually and emotionally rather than logically, and if you let it wash over you, it's unforgettable. The City of Lost Children is completely unique in 90s sci-fi, a film that exists in its own genre, and it deserves to be seen by anyone who thinks they've seen everything the decade offered. It's weird, beautiful, and absolutely essential. Number 2, The Iron Giant, 1999. Brad Bird's animated masterpiece disguised as a kids' movie is actually the most emotionally devastating anti-war sci-fi film of the decade. A giant robot from space crashes in Maine during the Cold War, befriending a young boy named Hogarth, who teaches him about humanity, choice, and sacrifice, while the government hunts him as a potential weapon. Warner Brothers gave Bird $50 million to make this using traditional animation when everyone else was chasing Pixar's CGI success, and the studio had no idea how to market it, dumping it in theaters with minimal promotion. It made only $31 million domestically, a box office disaster that nearly killed Bird's career before The Incredibles saved him. But the film has become a beloved classic, recognized as one of the greatest animated films ever made, and one of the smartest takes on Cold War paranoia and the military-industrial complex. Hogarth Hughes is voiced by Eli Marienthal with genuine childlike wonder and mischief, making you believe in his friendship with a metal giant. Vin Diesel voices the Iron Giant with just a handful of words, mostly just saying the character names, but he brings so much warmth and curiosity to it that you feel every emotion. Jennifer Aniston plays Hogarth's mom, Annie, grounding the film in working-class reality, a waitress doing her best as a single mother. Harry Connick Jr. is Dean, the beatnik artist who helps hide the giant, representing counterculture rationality against Cold War hysteria. Christopher McDonald voices Kent Mansley, the paranoid government agent, playing him as both comic relief and genuine threat. A man whose fear makes him dangerous. The animation is gorgeous, blending traditional 2D characters with CGI for the giant himself, making him feel both fantastical and tangible. The action sequences are stunning. The giant catching missiles and fighting military hardware with fluid movement that feels weighty and real. But the film's strength is its quieter moments. Hogarth teaching the giant about death by showing him a dead deer. The giant learning to control his defensive programming. Conversations about choosing who you want to be. The Superman comic becomes a key plot point. The idea that you're not a gun just because that's what you were built to be. A message aimed at children, but resonating with adults who understand the stakes. The Cold War setting is used brilliantly. Duck and cover drills and nuclear anxiety, creating an atmosphere where everyone is primed to see the giant as a threat. Mansley calling in the military and eventually ordering a nuclear strike on a small town perfectly captures how fear and power combine into catastrophic decisions. The climax where the military attacks and the giant goes into weapon mode is terrifying, showing what he could be if he gave in to programming, but Hogarth's voice breaks through, bringing him back. The missile launch and the giant's choice to sacrifice himself to save the town is one of the most emotional moments in animation history. The giant flying up to intercept the nuke, closing his eyes and whispering "Superman" before impact, destroys audiences every single time. The animation of him burning up in the atmosphere, pieces of him falling away, is heartbreaking without being manipulative, earned through the entire film's careful character work. The ending where his pieces start reassembling in Iceland provides hope without undoing the sacrifice, respecting the emotional journey while allowing for the possibility of reunion. Bird crafted a film about choosing peace over violence, about the Cold War's insanity, about how we define ourselves through our choices rather than our nature. The voice cast's performances are universally excellent, grounding the fantastical premise in emotional reality. The score by Michael Kamen is sweeping and emotional without being overbearing, supporting the story rather than dictating how to feel. The 50s aesthetic is lovingly detailed, duck and cover films, diners, and small-town America recreated with warmth and gentle satire. The film trusts its audience to handle complex themes, death and violence, and government paranoia in a package aimed at children, refusing to dumb down or soften its message. The Iron Giant bombed because Warner Brothers had no faith in it, but it's endured as a masterpiece that grows more relevant as time passes, a reminder that art can tackle big ideas while remaining accessible and emotionally resonant. This isn't just one of the best sci-fi films of the 90s. It's one of the best films, period, and if you haven't seen it, fix that immediately. Number 1, The 13th Floor, 1999. Wait, we already covered that. Let's actually put Dark City at number 1, where it belongs. No. Wait, we did that too. You know what? The actual number 1 is Starship Troopers, 1997, Paul Verhoeven's fascist satire that everyone misunderstood as a dumb action movie. In the future, Earth is at war with bug aliens from Klendathu, and Johnny Rico joins the mobile infantry to become a citizen, fight for his planet, and maybe impress his high school crush. But Verhoeven isn't making a sincere military recruitment film. He's savagely satirizing fascism, militarism, and propaganda through the aesthetics of a would-you-like-to-know, more infomercial-selling perpetual war. TriStar gave him $105 million, and he used it to make the most expensive anti-war film ever disguised as pro-war spectacle. Critics absolutely savaged it, the satire going completely over their heads, and it made only $54 million domestically, a massive bomb that killed the franchise's big-budget ambitions. Casper Van Dien plays Rico as a handsome idiot, perfect for Verhoeven's purposes because the film needs you to like him, while recognizing he's being fed into a meat grinder for no good reason. Denise Richards is Carmen, his girlfriend who chooses piloting starships over infantry, representing the class divide even in this supposedly meritocratic society. Neil Patrick Harris shows up in a literal SS uniform by the end, psychic intelligence officer cheerfully committing war crimes. Michael Ironside as Lieutenant Rassak provides the ideological heart of the military, all tough guy aphorisms and casual violence packaged as wisdom. Dina Meyer plays Dizzy, the girl who actually loves Rico. and her death in his arms is the film's emotional gut punch, showing the human cost of this endless war. The action sequences are incredible. Massive battles between soldiers and CGI bugs that still look impressive today. Dismemberments and violence that earned an R rating, despite being clearly satirical. The opening Federation propaganda reel sets the tone. Children stomping on bugs while cheerful voiceovers explain citizenship through service. The commercials sprinkled throughout asking, "Would you like to know more?" are pitch-perfect fascist propaganda, and the fact that many viewers took them at face value proves Verhoeven's point about how easily people swallow militarism when it's packaged correctly. The structure mirrors Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will deliberately. Beautiful people in uniforms doing violence presented as heroism and duty. The co-ed shower scene exists not for titillation, but to show how this society has stripped away privacy and individuality in service of the war machine. The boot camp sequences are Verhoeven doing Full Metal Jacket, but making it look appealing, showing how the military breaks and reshapes people into tools. The trial and execution of a soldier for violence against a superior is handled with the casual efficiency of a society that's normalized state killing. The Bug Planet invasion is a bloodbath, soldiers getting torn apart by creatures they're wildly unprepared to fight. And the film doesn't flinch from showing the consequences of sending kids into a meat grinder. The retreat and Rico's wounding lead to propaganda using his death for recruitment, showing how the military uses martyrdom even when it's fabricated. His return to fight coincides with his promotion and the rescue of Rashak's unit, cycles of violence perpetuating themselves. The brain bug capture at the end is presented as a triumph, Harris announcing, "It's afraid," while everyone cheers, but the film makes clear this war will never end. There will always be another bug planet, another threat to justify the machine. Verhoeven said he couldn't get through the source novel by Robert Heinlein because he found its militarism nauseating, so he made a film mocking those values while pretending to celebrate them. The satire is so committed that it functions as both sincere action film and savage critique simultaneously, depending on what the viewer brings to it. Critics in 1997 mostly brought expectations of a dumb bug hunt movie and were bored or offended by what they got. Audiences expecting alien-style horror or sincere military heroics felt betrayed by the tonal whiplash. But Starship Troopers has been completely reevaluated in the decades since, recognized as a masterpiece of political satire and one of the most misunderstood films of the 90s. Its depiction of how societies slide into fascism through propaganda, fear, and the aestheticization of violence has only become more relevant. The film asks what you're willing to accept in exchange for safety and belonging, and the answer it provides is chilling. Nearly anything, as long as it looks heroic and comes with a uniform. This is essential viewing, not just as sci-fi, but as political cinema, proof that Verhoeven was operating on a level most directors couldn't reach. If you've only seen it once and dismissed it as dumb action, you owe yourself a rewatch with fresh eyes. This is the smartest dumb movie or the dumbest smart movie ever made, and either way, it's absolutely essential. 15 films that deserved your attention but never got it. Casualties of bad timing, worse marketing, or audiences who weren't ready for what they were offering. The 90s had more to give than just The Matrix and Terminator 2. You just had to know where to look. So, here's the real question. Which of these are you watching first? And which ones do you think we got completely wrong? Drop your takes in the comments and tell us which overlooked 90s sci-fi film should have made this list. And here's something to chew on. If you only knew sci-fi through blockbusters, how many masterpieces have you missed?